Welcome to the City of Harrisburg Subrecipients Guide to HUD Grant Programs. This series will cover the basics of applying for and successfully managing CDBG and ESG grant funding from the city. This video will focus on how to apply for funds. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, commonly known as HUD, provides many diverse types of grant funding to the state and local governments. The City of Harrisburg administers 3 HUD-funded programs: CDBG, ESG, and HOME. Of these 3 grants, the city opens applications to nonprofit organizations and agencies for CDBG and ESG funds. Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG funds, are used to develop viable urban communities through community development projects. The City of Harrisburg uses CDBG funds for housing development and support, public facilities, and infrastructure improvements and public services. Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG funds, are used to address homelessness and housing insecurity. ESG funds can be used to provide street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and homelessness prevention. The city's funding application is open to CDBG and ESG projects. The City of Harrisburg is responsible for deciding how to use CDBG and ESG funds based on local needs, current resources, input from community residents and community partners, and more. There are several steps that the city takes when planning how to best use CDBG and ESG funds. The planning process begins with the Consolidated Plan, or CON Plan, which is written every 5 years. In the CON Plan, the city identifies its greatest needs and develops objectives for the funds. The city considers community needs, existing resources, priorities for funding, and proposed activities to be funded. The CON Plan includes a description of the lead agency executing the plan, outlines the process of developing the CON Plan, describes its housing and homeless needs assessment, provides a housing market analysis, outlines a strategic plan for the next 5 years, and includes a 1-year annual action plan, AAP, for how the next annual allocation of funds will be used. Each year, the city develops an annual action plan, or AAP. The AAP is a 1-year plan which describes specific planned uses of funds for each program year based on goals and priorities identified in the CON Plan. During the year that the CON Plan is written, the AAP is included with the CON Plan. Citizen participation is a crucial part of the CDBG planning process. Federal regulations require that the city develops and executes a Citizen Participation Plan, or CPP, which describes how citizen input is gathered and considered during the planning process. The CPP can be found on the city's website and includes details on how to find the CON Plan and Annual Action Plan. It also includes information on public hearings and public comment periods. Citizens are encouraged to participate in public hearings and to provide feedback on proposed plans. As you consider applying for CDBG and ESG funds, the CPP may be a helpful tool for determining how you can provide feedback to the city about ways that you think funds could be used most effectively. The Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, or CAPER, is the city's end-of-the-year report. In the CAPER, the city assesses whether it is making measurable progress towards the goals outlined in the CON Plan and the Annual Allocation Plan. This is a helpful tool for considering how your proposed activity will work toward addressing the city's goals and how you will measure outcomes. When you're considering applying for funds from the city, it is important to think about how your project will address the priority needs outlined in the city's CON Plan. If your project does not meet one or more of these needs, it is not eligible for funding. The city's current identified priority needs include affordable housing, public services, public facilities and infrastructure, demolition and blight removal, homelessness and housing services, and economic development. To be eligible to apply for funds, your organization must be either a public agency or a private nonprofit entity with a 501c designation. You must also be in good standing with federal and state governments and the City of Harrisburg. Not all activities and projects are eligible for funds. Activities must meet a priority need and fit into one of the three following categories: CDBG Public Services, CDBG Public Facilities, or ESG Service Delivery. CDBG public service activities must primarily serve low to moderate income individuals and families, victims of domestic violence and abuse, homeless, and special needs populations. Examples of public service activities could be after-school programs, food pantry programs, programs for elderly and disabled, and much more. CDBG public facilities projects include rehabilitation, including acquisition and construction of public facilities and infrastructure. Examples could include sidewalk improvements, updates to a community center, and more. ESG service delivery programs include emergency shelter, street outreach, supportive services, day shelter, homeless prevention services, and more. Once you have confirmed that your project meets one of the city's identified priority needs, it's time to think about applying for funds. The City of Harrisburg publishes a funding application for CDBG and ESG projects annually. Application materials include details on all requirements, application submission instructions, and a checklist of required attachments. Several items that are required in the application may take some time to complete. As you consider applying for funds, it may be a good idea to start preparing some of the required items in advance of submitting your application. There are a few important requirements to note. First, the minimum amount of funding that you may apply for is $20,000. Secondly, funding is provided on a reimbursement basis only. In other words, your organization must make the upfront payments for materials and labor before submitting an invoice to the city for reimbursement. If your organization does not have the capacity to manage the grant on a reimbursement basis and the ability to document that capacity, it will not be eligible for funds. Additionally, applications for ESG funds require matching funds. This means that you must also show that you have raised additional funds for the project. Match can be in the form of cash donations, loans, property, other grant funds, in-kind donations, donated materials and supplies, volunteer hours, dollar amount value of volunteer hours served, and more. CDBG projects will earn additional points on their application for providing matching and leveraged funds, but they're not required. See the application document for more details on all requirements, submission instructions, and attachments. When completing your application, pay close attention to the required attachments. All attachments must be included with your application at the time of submission. Proof of matching funding in the form of letters of commitment or awards from other funding sources is a threshold requirement. You must have this proof of funding in place at the time you submit your application. You must also be able to provide current financial audit in addition to year-to-date financial statements. If your organization has not undergone a recent audit, you may be able to submit reviewed financial statements instead of an audit. See the application materials for more details. Other required attachments include your organization's bylaws and a resolution by your board approving your application for funding. Please note that your organization must also be registered with sam.gov. Registration is free of charge, but may take several weeks to process. All attachments must be included in your application at the time it is submitted. Throughout the funding application document, you'll notice points associated with each question. The city will score applications using these points as a guide. Applications are scored objectively on the following sections: project description, agency summary and capacity, statement of need, and budget and financial analysis. It may be useful to self-score your application before submitting it. Applications that receive less than 75 points are not eligible. The application process begins with attending a mandatory workshop. The city hosts at least 2 workshops each year, typically towards the beginning of the year. Your organization must attend a workshop to be eligible for funds. Applications and all attachments must be submitted by the due date. Applications must be submitted in electronic format, scanned application with attachments signed and dated. Funding decisions will be made during the spring and summer. Please note that the funds themselves do not become available until October. So while you may be approved to receive funding in the spring or summer, you may not actually begin to receive funds until several months later in October. You are not authorized to begin your project until you've executed a contract known as a subrecipient agreement with the city. For more information on CDBG and ESG programs, watch the city's other training videos or follow these links to find additional useful resources on the HUD Exchange. On the HUD Exchange, you can find helpful resources, articles, training webinars, and more for all HUD-funded programs. Resources range from high-level overview to very detailed technical guidance. The most important pages for you to look at are the CDBG program and Emergency Solutions Grants program. Thank you for watching the City of Harrisburg's Guide to HUD Grant Programs. For more information, check out the city's website at the link below, and be sure to watch the other videos in this series for more information on eligibility, program requirements, and managing your grant funds.